Controversial, shy, successful, odd. These are some of the words I would personally use to describe today's subject. Everyone has an opinion on this one. And regardless of where you stand, one thing is true. He changed pop culture forever. Famous for being famous, overnight celebrities, overconsumption in pop culture would not be part of our everyday if it wasn't for him. Hello and welcome, artists and fellow art lovers. I am so happy that you have pressed or stumbled upon this episode. This is a space where we explore interesting people and artists to hopefully learn from their mistakes and be inspired by their journey and hopefully inspire us during ours, right? I invite you to create along with me, work on any project you got going on, or if you're just on your commute, take a deep breath and let's dive into it. Today we are tearing back the heavy aluminum foil of the art world's ultimate sphinx, Andy Warhol, better known to history as Andy Warhol. If you loved our journey through David Bowie's kaleidoscope reinventions, today we're moving from the glittering stage lights straight into the flashbulb glare of the pop art movement. But make no mistake, underneath the iconic silver wig, behind those impenetrable dark sunglasses, and staring out from behind the endless rows of Campbell soup cans lies a deep, complex, hauntingly fragile human story. We're talking about a sickly, terrified immigrant child in industrial Pittsburgh who remade himself into a mirror of American consumerism, a magnet for horrific tragedy, and the man who weaponized superficiality to say terrifyingly deep things about fame, death, and desire. So settle in, pull your easel a little closer, and get comfortable. We are going all the way from a cramped tar-papered shack on Orr Street to the absolute zenith of New York high society, and straight through the gunfire, the scandals, and the bittersweet legal battles that followed his final breath. To understand Andy, you have to understand where he came from, because everything he built later in life was an elaborate, glittering escape from it. He was born Andy Warhol Jr. on August 6, 1928 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His parents, Andrew and Julia Warhol, were working-class immigrants who had journeyed from eastern Slovakia. His father labored back-breaking hours in local coal mines and construction sites to keep food on the table. His mother, Julia, was a devout religious woman, deeply artistic soul who embroidered linens, drew whimsical cats, and maintained a tight-knit cultural cocoon for her three sons in a gritty, smoke-choked enclave of Pittsburgh. The Warhol household was a religious one, attending church multiple times a week. Young Andy's life was upended by a terrifying medical crisis. At the age of 8, he contracted a severe neurological disorder commonly known as St. Vitus dance. It causes involuntary jerky muscle movements, blotchy skin discoloration, and nervous system distress. Bedridden for months on end, isolated from schoolmates, and terrified of the sterile environment of hospitals, Andy became a painfully shy, hypersensitive recluse. His sanctuary was his mother's bedside table, a small radio, movie magazine, glamour photographs of Hollywood starlets like Shirley Temple. While other boys played baseball in the alleyways, Andy collected celebrity autographs, pasted glossy headshots into scrapbooks, and discovered something vital. Fantasy was infinitely safer, cleaner, and more beautiful than harsh reality. When he finally recovered, the isolation left a psychological scar. He was pathologically self-conscious about his pale, blotchy skin, his thinning hair, and his working-class roots. He channeled that quiet obsession into his art. Recognizing his raw talent, his father had secretly set aside $1,500 in postal bonds specifically for Andy's college education before passing away in 1942. Honoring that dream, Andy enrolled at the Carnegie Institute of Technology, now the Carnegie Mellon University, in 1945 studying pictorial design. While his university peers gravitated towards the macho, rugged angst of abstract expressionism, splattering massive canvases with emotional trauma. Andy was busy drafting delicate, whimsical commercial illustrations. He graduated in 1949, packed his belongings, dropped the final A from his last name, and stepped off a bus into the roaring chaos of New York City. In New York, Warhol conquered Madison Avenue with a paintbrush and a pen. Working as a commercial illustrator through the 1950s, Andy quickly became one of the most successful, high-paid artists in the advertising industry. He drew delicate, stylized shoes for I. Miller, designed chic record sleeves for Columbia Records, illustrated book jackets, and perfected a unique blotted line technique that combined ink drawing with stamped replication, giving his commercial work a soft, dreamy quality. He even brought his mother, Julia, who had moved to New York to live with him, tried out the whimsical calligraphy lettering on his commercial assignments. He had financial security, status, and luxury, but Andy was creatively restless. He wanted to leap across the invisible, rigid line separating commercial advertising from high art. By 1960, he began painting comic strips like Popeye and Dick Tracy, only to discover the bitter disappointment that Roy Lichtenstein was already exploring similar pop culture themes. Frustrated, Andy asked a friend over dinner what he should paint to carve out his own unique territory. The friend famously replied, "Paint something you see every day, something everyone knows." The next morning, Andy walked down to his local grocery store, bought every variety of Campbell's soup can on the shelf. When he exhibited those 32 individual soup cans in July 1962 at Los Angeles Ferris Gallery, he sent an earthquake through the establishment. Traditionalists scoffed, critics gasped, and the public was mesmerized. Soon, he expanded his gaze to Coca-Cola bottles, Brillo soap pad boxes, and stacks of dollar bills, pioneering a mechanical photographic silkscreen technique. Silkscreening allowed him to mass-produce images mechanically, mirroring a booming hyper-consumerist America where soup, soft drinks, and movie stars were pumped out on identical assembly lines. Andy famously declared to the press, "I want to be a machine." He stripped his own hands from the canvas, favoring flat, brilliant, repeated surfaces that reflected both the dazzling emptiness and the hollow glamour of modern life. By 1964, Warhol established his legendary studio, The Factory. Located first on 47th Street, the entire interior was wrapped completely in heavy aluminum foil and sprayed top to bottom with silver paint by his resident photographer and friend, Bill Name. It became the ultimate pulsing magnetic core of New York's avant-garde counterculture. The Silver Factory was a chaotic, brilliant, and deeply dangerous social hothouse. Drag queens, underground poets, trust fund socialites, musicians like Lou Reed and Bob Dylan, and fringe actors drifted through its doors to orbit around Andy. He sat quietly behind his Bolex movie camera or his tape recorder, filming everything. He sat quietly behind his Bolex movie camera or his tape recorder, filming everything, judging nothing, just acting as a passive voyeuristic observer of human spectacle. He dubbed these electric figures his superstars, people like Eddie Sedgwick, Ultraviolet, and Viva, who achieved fleeting tragic fame in his radical underground films like Empire, Sleep, and Chelsea Girls. Many of the factory denizens struggled with crushing drug addictions, severe mental instability, and exploitation. Andy's infamous detachment often meant he was watching human car wrecks unfold right before his eyes without intervening, viewing human suffering as raw, unedited material for his art. Then, on June 3, 1968, the surreal fantasy turned violently, irreversibly real. Valerie Solanas, a radical feminist writer who had briefly drifted through the periphery of the factory and felt deeply rejected by Warhol after he misplaced a script she had given him. Well, she walked in the studio, pulled out a .32 caliber automatic pistol, and shot Andy point blank in the chest, nearly ending his life. The physical trauma was catastrophic. The bullet passed through both of his lungs, his spleen, stomach, and liver. Rushed to the Columbus Hospital, surgeons initially pronounced him dead on the operating table. That was before the doctor famously opened his chest and manually massaged his stopped heart back to life. Andy miraculously survived, but the bullet left permanent wreckage. He spent the remainder of his life wearing a heavy surgical corset to hold his mangled abdominal wall together. Paralyzed by a chronic, debilitating phobia of hospitals and doctors, the innocent open-door era of the silver factory was dead. The doors were locked, and security guards were put in place. In the 1970s and 1980s, Warhol executed yet another masterclass in reinvention, moving away from the gritty, drug-added underground of the 1960s. He morphed smoothly into the official court painter of international high society. Operating out of a new corporate-style studio on Broadway, Andy became a high-rolling society portraitist. If you were rich, famous, royal, or powerful, Mick Jagger, Liza Minnelli, Debbie Harry, John Lennon, or Muhammad Ali, to name a few, you sat for an instant Polaroid Photoshop with Andy. He translated those snapshots into vibrant silkscreen Technicolor portraits that commanded small fortunes. He funded Interview magazine, threw legendary drug-fueled parties at Studio 54, and coined his most famous prophecy, saying, "In the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes. Yet, beneath the glittering socialite, Andy remained a walking contradiction. He was deeply private, intensely religious, attending Latin Mass regularly at the Church of the Heavenly Rest on the Upper East Side while keeping his devout Catholicism entirely hidden from his circles, and quietly obsessed with morality. His haunting death and disaster series, featuring repeated silkscreens of electric chairs, mangled car crashes, and suicide leaps, proved that behind the cheerful soup cans lay an artist nervously aware of the fragility of flesh. In February 1987, at the age of 58, Andy's lifelong paralyzing dread of hospitals finally caught up with him in the worst way possible. Suffering from chronic gallbladder troubles that he had ignored and hidden for years, he finally checked into New York Hospital for a routine gallbladder removal surgery. The surgery itself was deemed successful, but tragedy struck during the post-operative recovery phase due to a massive fluid overload, inadequate medical monitoring, and a sudden cardiac arrest. Andy Warhol passed away quietly in his sleep on the morning of February 22nd, 1987. But even death could not escape supreme controversy. A subsequent state health investigation cited the hospital for severe medical negligence and deficient post-operation care. Warhol's estate, represented by his brothers and the newly formed Andy Warhol Foundation, filed a high-profile wrongful death lawsuit against the hospital, which was ultimately settled out of court for an estimated $3 million in 1991. When his final will was read, it sparked yet another legal circus. True to his nature, Warhol left almost his entire massive fortune, valued anywhere between $90 million to $600 million, to establish a charity foundation for the visual arts, plunging his executors and inner circle into years of multi-million-dollar legal battles over estate fees and missing assets. Today, the Andy Warhol Museum in his hometown stands proudly as the largest museum in North America dedicated entirely to a single artist. He took the mundane objects of the grocery aisle, the empty worship of celebrity culture, and the mechanical repetition of mass media, and transformed them into the permanent grammar of modern visual existence. As you blend your paints on your canvas today, or take a moment to fully immerse yourself in this episode, let's take a moment to remember Andy, the sickly, frightened immigrant child from the smoke-choked streets of Pittsburgh who looked at a cheap, mass-market can of soup, saw the soul of modern America, and reflected it back to us in shimmering gold and silver. Thank you for tuning in to another deep dive on Paint and Chats. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, stay creative, do cool stuff with friends, and never dismiss a feminist.